Here's a hot take. Charge what you're worth is advice that doesn't cut it anymore. Maybe it never really did. I would say that it is time to ditch feelings-based pricing and replace it with a smart, intellectual formula that actually works. Stick around, let's dive into the real way to set your prices for your products or your services. I say this as someone who's completely screwed up and had to relearn and rework the way I do it. This way works. So click the like button below if either of these two scenarios resonates. Number one, you have sticker shock when you look at your own prices and you don't think you can actually charge that or get people to pay it. Or if you've charged before and then you even get paid for something, but you start doing it and you think, what was I thinking? This is taking me infinitely loads longer. It's not even worth it at this point. I'm frustrated with myself. I have no one to blame but me. Ugh, all those emo feels, I get it. By the end of this video, I'm hoping that I'm gonna give you some practical tips on how you can divorce yourself though from that line of thinking, whether either vein that it is, and you can start to arbitrarily look at your pricing strategy as a business owner. I'm Ashlyn. I left corporate marketing for freelance copywriting almost 9 years ago at this point. I've built a team. I've sold about $1.5 million in copywriting services, not even the other sides of my business. Along the way, we coined the phrase copywriting for creatives. We built the Copy Bar template shop where we serve up copywriting templates and a subscription for the creative set. And I've cultivated an engaged community of hundreds inside the Copy Bar collective. I'm also a working mom of 3 and I'm coming at this. I hope you hear my heart. I'm not bragging on all of this. I've 100% screwed up my pricing so badly before, like needed a massive intervention. That first intervention came by way of my friend Shana Skidmore through the Blueprint model, and every year I lead a new crew of entrepreneurs through it. It was so stinking helpful for me. Look down below for more details there. Let's go ahead and dig straight into pricing. Pricing begins with this first key point, knowing your costs: material, labor, and time. That's what cost is made up of. I'm gonna break that down more because what I see a lot of businesses that I coach, people that I talk to, I know because I did it, you forget that as either a service provider or a product creator, product developer, you get paid twice if you're the business owner. So you get paid once as the worker bee, the one creating the thing, executing the service. Then you also get paid as the business owner. So you're an employee of the business, but then you're also the CEO of your business. That alone, that first little nugget that I just gave, might have just mind blown you. You've only been paying yourself once in your business. And if you can't do that, then you may have pricing that's off, and I'm gonna keep unpacking that. So let's go through item by item that cost involves. First up, materials. This is your cost of goods, your actual concrete costs. So with nobody even touching the project or the service, what would it cost to execute? These are things, for those of you that have a physical product, it's the beeswax, it's the clay, it's the pieces of jewelry, it's the leather, it's the oasis if you're a floral designer, the film if you're a photographer. Those of you who have digital-based business, this is your subscription stack. Your kit, your HoneyBook or Dubsado. If you offer a client gift, your client gift is baked in here. If you're a copywriter or some sort of business and you pull transcriptions from products, or you run interviews and then you pay $5 Starbucks cards to the people that you interviewed for the project. This is the cost of goods. So figuring that out first is really important. After you line item out that and you figure that out, the next piece of the puzzle is your time. I am obsessed with tracking my time. I try to do it at least about once a quarter to check in and see, are things taking as long as I think that they are taking. I've seen before where sometimes we as humans think it takes us 3 times less than it actually takes us to do something. I also swear by, it's chirping, I swear by this little clock that I got from Amazon to keep me drilled into a task when I'm doing it, because I know how long it takes me. I know it takes me about 1 hour to write a good sales email, even if I'm using AI to help me generate different little bits of it, or I'm using that to refine and tweak and judge through some stuff. The ideation and the writing process of my craft takes me X amount of time. You should know that. If you've never done before, we told our members this. Our head of agency, Sarah, and I were leading a call for our members, and we told them the value of, and I stand by it, going through your entire client process or product development process and looking at every single step of the puzzle and drilling down to the 15-minute increment, how long things take you. So sending that email or delivering that deliverable takes you 0.25 of an hour, or 1.0, 1.5. In corporate agency days, that's where I first started tracking my time and charging it to the quarter hour. And it's just been a helpful skill that I'll always carry with me professionally because it helps me think about exactly how long something takes to execute. So know your time on any sort of project. You need to know that this package costs you 25 hours to execute, whether you're paying someone else to do it or you're doing it. That is just how long it takes. It takes what it takes. You would have to pay a freelancer to do the work if you couldn't, right? Okay, the next part of the pricing puzzle is demand. This is why charge what you're worth doesn't work. You're human. You have innate value on you by the fact that you're created and you're breathing air. So you have value apart from the work, the craft that you do, because the craft itself, we have to look at apart from a person, and supply and demand comes into play, right? You have to read the room. You have to realize, do people even want this thing that you're putting out there? Does it have value? Does the market declare that that thing has value on its own? You could be the best underwater basket weaving ballerina teacher of all time, but if people don't want that, it doesn't matter what you think it's worth, right? Demand is one of my favorite pieces of the puzzle because this is where marketing gets to come into play and speak to different pieces and help people understand why there is demand. And hopefully demand is going to grow as your brand awareness grows. It's also going to grow as your skills improve. Demand may also increase in something that you've created as the value for it goes up. So if you're able to prove that it's even more valuable than the price point. I said it in a recent video and I'll say it again. At the end of the day, people will always, they have for millennia, people will always pay for a problem to be solved if it is an acute need that they have. And if you're able to prove that there's this much value and you're charging them this much, they'll also want to pay you for it. You want to give them so much value that they would feel cheated if they went anywhere else because you're giving them all of this for this. So before I get into the margins that you may want to try to run, and I'll get into that in a sec, I'll just recap this first point of what cost actually includes. It's material, labor, and time. And as that worker bee and as probably the queen bee in your business too, you get paid twice. There's the actual working of the craft, executing of the thing, and then the business owner, the owner's draw is a separate payment because being the CEO is a different job, right? That's a different, being the owner, that's a whole different set of skills. One other little takeaway here, if you've never tracked your time before, look down below. I have a freebie time tracker. Look at this, I even pulled one out for you that I have been working on. I try to do this regularly to just see, am I doing the things that only I can do? All right, the next concept that I want to talk about in this video is how you price your time. How do you figure out what that number is, what your time is worth? One easy way to do this when you're thinking about yourself as the business owner, especially if you already know what your salary should be for that, you know what your take home needs to be. If you know your annual income goal, step 2 is to figure out how many hours are you going to be working. I usually, if it helps to give you my number, I say about 1,200 hours. That accounts for plenty of leeway as a working mom, some good chunks of time off. It's about 25 hours a week for 48 weeks. And then you divide your annual income goal by your billable hours, and that would be an hourly rate. So you can use that number, you can put it on a sticky note. Dan Martell walks through that in his book, Buy Back Your Time. That was one of the best refresher books on time and cost that I read in 2024. So that's one way that you can figure your hourly rate. That I have found is better in thinking of yourself as the owner of the business, like we talked about in step 1, that queen bee type role. But when you're thinking about pricing your time, when you are the product developer or the service provider, the first place to look to is what would an average employee or freelancer get paid to do that thing. This is going to take into account, like we talked about, what the market demands, what people are actually getting paid for this. What is the time cost? I have 6 commandments for you to consider as you think about what this number is for you. Number 1, do not be emotional about it. You're just going to look at this number. We can figure out later how to add value, how to sell it, all that kind of stuff. The marketer is not invited to this meeting. This is you being in the CEO seat, in the CFO seat. You just need to think like that. What trips up a lot of creatives sometimes is the minute they start working through and figuring out their numbers, there's the voices about, well, you'll never be able to sell at that value point. That comes into your head. Don't worry about that right now. Think about it without emotions. Number 2, this goes straight into that. Don't worry about price matching. Don't worry about outpricing your competitors, your peers. They came up with the number that they think is right. And I know some entrepreneurs have said out there, maybe it was in that Dan Martell book, he said something like, they're not making money. So definitely don't price off of what they're doing. A lot of businesses don't. We know a lot of businesses fail. So you think about your numbers smartly. Number 3, again, don't worry about sticker shock. We're looking at hard costs. What does it cost to produce this? Number 4, don't let those voices come up in your head, but I love doing this. This comes so easily for me. This comes so naturally for me. I could do this in my sleep. I've been doing this for 15 years. Don't let those little voices come up to you and tell you, because it's easy for you, you should just cost it low. Number 5, don't apologize. It is what it is. That's probably one of the best feelings that can come along with figuring out your costs in the proper way, because you just realize, like, I'm sorry if you can't pay that. It costs what it costs. It costs what market value is. And number 6, this overlaps a little bit with what I was saying earlier, but don't worry about, as you figure out what your cost is, as you start to analyze your time and track your time, don't worry about how you're going to pitch, position, or sell the offer. That's what I'm here for. That's a different conversation, and I love to talk about that. Hopefully you'll find value in videos that I produce and content that we have out there on positioning and selling and price anchoring and all that. We are just looking at the costs. So now you can figure out the hard costs of your product or your service. The materials plus your time equals hard costs. This is the baseline of what you have to charge to break even. I am not a math girly by nature. I've had to learn how to be one in owning and operating a business for years. If I can figure this out, I know you can. That's how you come up with your hard costs, but we haven't even considered taxes yet, so let's do that. This is probably the linchpin of the whole video right here. I'm gonna recommend you the margins that you should probably try to run at, and this is my recommendation for most creative entrepreneurs, most small businesses. I would try to go for a 40 to 50% profit margin. That means, let's just use round numbers. If something costs you $400 to create, you need to charge $10,000. I realize a lot of you just ran screaming and that freaked you out. If that freaks you out, just know Alex Hormozi's out there up in my inbox talking about 80 to 90% profit margins. But I know, again, this is why I've messed up with pricing in the past too. I remember the first time I figured this out, I thought no one is gonna pay that. I can't. That's where we talk about value and adding so much value that it does become worth whatever the price point is. But you can see that those are the hard costs. And then once you add in taxes, that ramps it up. And your margins, especially if you ever want to, run some special offers or discounts, you've got to have that margin left. The business has to make money or else it is a hobby. So the margin is very important, because a lot of businesses will tell you that their revenue is X and Y and Z and it's so high, but what is the margin? Like how lean can you run for as fat of margins as possible with integrity? Now we're talking. Okay, before I give you a bonus tip that was so helpful for me last year, an exercise that it was probably the first time I'd really done it, I want to talk to you about the rule of thirds, because this was, as I was starting to wrap my brain the first time, again, talking to Shanna, understanding the blueprint model and looking at my costs, reading all the books about pricing and trying to figure this out, I started to see a third, a third, a third. And that was a great lens. So if you can think in terms of a third is costs, we said about 40%, but let's say a third is costs, a third goes to the house, so to the running of the operation, to paying taxes, etc. And then 30% is your profit margins. I guess it would really be 33.3% or whatever would add up to 100%. But again, seeing it as a third, a third, a third, a third goes to costs, a third to the house, and a third to the owner, aka profit margin. Easy, helpful way to look at all of that. All right, to wrap this up, I'm going to give you a few pro tips on positioning to sell. Copywriters, this is where we shine. This is messaging. This is positioning. This is value propositions. Marketing, you're allowed back into the chat now. First up, you need to get the package and the container right. Again, all of this assumes people actually want what you have to do. You've read the room. You do understand that people want this. First thing you need to do is get that package and the container right. Container is everything. Look at a day rate versus a full-fledged custom offer. Maybe it's even the same amount of hours. So the amount of hours to execute your day rate coaching is the same as your full package, but you're able to add on some value. If you can get it done in one day, maybe that's of tremendous value to your client, and you're able to do that in an expedited process, and they want that and they're willing to pay a premium for it. Or maybe when it's full-fledged and it's custom and it's spaced out a little bit more, you're able to bake in more touch points with them, even though it's just spaced out, it's the same amount. This is why when you approach an offer, you look at the container, you have an expectation in your head when you pay $97 for a course, how it's going to be versus a $5,000 group coaching program. Your brain thinks a different way about that. So container is really important when you're talking about perceived value. Besides container, that messaging and positioning, like I said, is so important. I talked earlier in a video about figuring out the value prop. I even gave you an AI prompt to be able to do that. You want to spend the lion's share of your time figuring this out. I've done lots of videos about creating hooks and wrestling through this. It is so much fun. It's what I love to do, but you have to spend some time on it. The marketing and the sales argument has to hit. You have to help them draw the proper conclusions about the price and the value. I did a video about 2025 copywriting trends that I'm seeing, but a lot of old tried and true axioms come into play here and work. And if you stick around here, I talk about them profusely. All right, I was gonna give you that bonus tip. So one of the best, it was so good. One of the best things that I did after I saw a thread that Cody Sanchez threw up on Twitter about how she challenged herself to cut costs. So we talked about your hard costs earlier. What if you can pull those down? Like if you looked and you saw tremendous sticker shock, maybe you want better margins, and this would be an exercise to do to get that. But if you're freaking out about the sticker shock, what if you just tried to get your hard costs down? So one way that you could do that is look at your hard costs and pick a number. So Cody talked about how I think she picked 20%. My favorite number is 16. So this past year, I said, I want to see if I can cull down our expenses by 16%. So I printed out every single credit card statement from, I think it was like a quarter and a half, stapled them, and I just went through with my highlighter, and anything that I thought I either could slice or negotiate, I highlighted it, and I went back through and I cut costs by 16%. So that is that's like throwing water out of the boat, right? That is one fantastic tip. Again, there's what the thread looked like if you want to copy that. So I would at least recommend that when it comes to siphoning out some of those hard costs. All right, you just learned to price yourself based on the 3 key pieces that go into price, because it is a formula, it is not a feeling. And then I threw in a few marketing tips along the way to help you think through value, because I know my people, and I know that if you're thinking about raising your rates, which that might have just shown you that you need to do, it can get a little bit sticky and we can get in our feels. So don't worry, I'll help you with that along the way. If you have made it this far, you definitely need this guide. I have 7 ways to get yourself financially set in your business. Look down below, QR code right here, or go to aw.inc/blueprint and you can grab that guide. I love talking about pricing. I love helping you figure this stuff out. One way you can cull down on those costs with your time is through the use of AI. Working a little bit faster. So be sure to watch the next video that I've got teed up for you. It's about 5 ways that you can use ChatGPT better this year. If you found this helpful and you want to dive deeper into more strategies around pricing and value, hit the subscribe button and watch this playlist I have for you on small business finances teed up right here. As always, here's to working from a place of more rest, less hustle, and I'll see you in the next video.